Imagine you're wandering around Scotland right about the turn of the millennia. Not this past millennia, or the one before that. I'm talking somewhere around 100 BC to 100 AD. You're new to the area, having just left the village that you were born into, a couple miles away, and you're living your little Iron Age life, maybe pushing a flock of sheep around, looking for berries, thinking about iron, I guess. Whatever it is that's going to get you to the ripe old age of 43. You round the corner, and there, off in the distance, is the biggest building you've ever seen in your life. We're talking 40, maybe 50 feet high. I mean, you've seen some tall trees in your day, maybe even some really big rocks, but this is ridiculous. What you're looking at is a Broch, and it's doing exactly what it was meant to do, which is impress you. At first it looks defensive, like some sort of imposing fortress. It seems almost obvious, with unscalable walls that reach to the sky, a round base, and a single entrance. Any man on top would have an unmatched advantage of having an unnatural high ground and visibility for miles. But that's only kind of half true. If you take a good look, they don't serve as great defenses. Without windows, you can't shoot arrows unless there is access to the roof. The dry set stones are easily knocked off or rammed through. The one entrance is somewhat defensive, but makes for a bad day if someone were to, say, start a fire right there. So they probably relied on their unusual size as a deterrent. Its main role was as a status symbol. These were just the ancient Scots' way of keeping up with the Joneses, the Mac Joneses. Humans, after all, love proving they're the best by stacking rocks. These skyscrapers of their day were all built almost exactly the same way. Round, made of stacked dry stone with no type of mortar or cement, and hollow-walled, with steps spiraling to the top inside those hollow walls. Most that remain in some state are found here in northern Scotland. The Broch of Musa on a small island in the Shetlands is the best preserved, and shows how most of these would have looked. Musa is the best preserved of several hundred sites that at some point were definitely Brochs, or at least assumed to have been based on excavation. These things ended up everywhere over the course of only a couple of hundred years. The clans were a bit competitive, I guess. But when you take the time and energy to cut rocks into very convenient shapes, like big bricks, those stones tend to get carried away to be used elsewhere. Musa is way out on a small island in the Shetlands, the most remote of the island chains in Scotland, so it had an advantage. But the other Brochs built around the country were easy pickings. Duntrodden and Duntelve, Dun being another word for fort, and commonly used interchangeably with Broch, they sit fairly close to each other, and were still intact as of around 1720. Those stones were robbed to make the Bernera Barracks, which was used to house British soldiers in the fight against the Jacobite uprising. Kind of a spit in the face to the Scots in two ways. Duntelve, though, is a great example of the interior staircase, as you can see. Those two Brochs, despite their proximity, seem to be a little bit more standalone than the Broch of Gurness here. Maybe they were more utilized as a status symbol, while here at Gurness, with the Broch situated as a centerpiece to what appears to be a defensive settlement, or village, and may have been less a status symbol and more of a citadel. The Broch here at Gurness had several interior stories, multiple hearths, a water cistern, and would have had a thatched roof. Most likely the home of the principal clan of the area would also have been a bastion for the local populace should they come under attack. The village that surrounds it had a large assortment of stone buildings, lined along a main street that served the residents until the site was abandoned, potentially around the time the Romans made their way through the Orkneys, as well as into the highlands of mainland Scotland. Roman pottery dated to around 60 AD has been found here. Broch building fell out of style around this time, around 100 AD. But that doesn't mean they were no longer used. The Iron Age clans evolved into the second chapter when the Picts moved in. They stayed until the Vikings arrived just prior to 1000 AD. After the Viking phase ran its course, medieval Scots would utilize them. Excavations at Old Scatness, at the southern tip of the Shetland Islands, show influence from almost every one of those populations, having been used for around 15 centuries. The entire site evolved over the years with 3 major phases, each time building, rebuilding, or adding on to the main tower as well as the surrounding structures. These include multiple wheelhouses, which are neither wheels nor houses. Dug into the ground with thatched roofs dotted around the Broch itself, their usage is still somewhat of a mystery. Many have animals buried underneath them, skeletons most often of lambs, but others contain cattle, pigs, and sheep. This would lead some archaeologists to believe that they were ritualistic in nature. Maybe the Iron Age butcher shops. I don't know. The more I research old stuff, the more it seems to be that everyone just assumes something was part of some shamanistic ritual. It has its place, but sometimes people just gotta eat. How many rituals can a group of people do when they only live to be 35, if you're lucky? I digress. As each year went by and each culture and society evolved, the usage of the hundreds of Brochs around the country certainly fluctuated as well. One would assume that during their partial abandonments, a lot of these stones would find themselves being moved elsewhere to build walls, houses, pens, and folds. If you're driving around northern Scotland, there's a chance you're whipping past a wall or a building that was built using some stones that were potentially cut before Julius Caesar was even alive. So that's pretty cool. Check out another video here. Thanks for watching. Thanks to my Patreon subscribers for helping me get here. And as always, until next time, get lost.